At 9:30 hours on Tuesday morning, they fired me. By 2:30 that same afternoon, I had frozen their $750 million freight empire solid. Here is how 22 years of unyielding loyalty turned into the most methodical corporate payback in Midwestern logistics history. My name is Vance Miller, though everyone in the transportation industry knows me by my military call sign, Anvil. I am 49 years old, and for the past 22 years, I have been the invisible backbone holding Hayes Freight Systems together. If you purchased corn in Chicago, beef in Denver, or agricultural machinery after a severe tornado swept through Kansas, I am the exact reason those shipments arrived on schedule. I directed operations for a $750 million logistics empire, coordinating 1,800 long-haul trucks across 14 states. That is corporate phrasing for the guy who ensures America stays fed and operating smoothly. I never desired a penthouse office with Italian leather chairs. My desk sat in the concrete basement of the central dispatch hub, smelling faintly of diesel fuel, ozone, and stale diner coffee. It sat right in the operational heart of the building, where real work actually gets executed. The steady, ambient crackle of long-range citizen band radios gave me the constant pulse of the open highway. Before I explain precisely how I dismantled a massive freight conglomerate with military precision, allow me to provide vital context. Before entering commercial logistics, I spent 12 years in the United States Army, directing heavy supply convoys across hostile stretches of Kandahar and Helmand Province. I lost 3 brave soldiers during my second deployment because a distant bureaucratic supply officer delayed our armored ammunition resupply by 4 hours. I swore on their memory that I would never allow logistics failures or incompetence to destroy livelihoods ever again. That is why when pampered civilians mess with the supply chain, I take it as a personal insult. The trouble at Hayes Freight Systems began when the original founder, old Raymond Hayes, retired to his private golf estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. Raymond was a ruthless old founder, certainly, but he was a seasoned veteran who understood a fundamental truth. Freight moves on mutual trust, legal precision, and unforgiving timing. Raymond and I shared an unwritten pact. I kept his 1,800 rigs rolling safely across the country, and he respected my operational authority and stayed out of my way. Then arrived his son, Carter Hayes. Carter was 32 years old, armed with a fresh Executive Master of Business Administration degree from a private college his father had funded with a building donation. The young man sported teeth so artificially white they practically glowed under office lights, and wore tailored suits that cost more than my first 3 pickup trucks combined. He sauntered into the chief executive office, acting as though he had conquered the business world single-handedly. During his first week, Carter installed a rooftop meditation room. During his second week, he hired a woman named Chloe Bennett as chief culture officer. That was corporate speak for his socialite girlfriend, who needed a high-paying executive title to justify her lifestyle. By his third week, Carter was walking through the mechanics' bays, lecturing master technicians about disrupting the trucking industry through mindfulness and digital alignment. I kept my head down and focused on the numbers. I am a seasoned professional. I had survived 3 military deployments, 2 recessions, and a sophisticated cyber attack that required me to route 400 temperature-sensitive grain trucks using physical paper maps, payphones, and handwritten ledgers. I reasoned that I could easily survive a spoiled kid like Carter Hayes. However, the friction between us developed like a slow leak in a hydraulic pressure line. Carter despised me from day one. To him, I represented the old guard. I was analog, rugged, and uncompromising. I was a middle-aged veteran who wore heavy steel-toed work boots to executive board meetings and preferred direct citizen band radio communication to corporate messaging applications. When a truck driver is stuck on an icy shoulder during a sub-zero blizzard in South Dakota, you do not send him a colorful emoji. You send him a heavy tow rig and clear instructions. To Carter, my experience made me obsolete. To me, Carter was like an arrogant second lieutenant fresh out of officer training school. Dangerous because he possessed authority but zero practical field experience. The breaking point arrived during peak autumn harvest season. In Midwestern logistics, harvest season is our holy war. Everything moves simultaneously. corn from Iowa, soybeans from Illinois, and winter wheat from Kansas. I was working 14-hour days, managing shift schedules, and coordinating directly with family farmers whose entire annual income depended on getting crops to river barges before seasonal freezing weather arrived. That was when the company-wide electronic mail arrived. The subject line read, "Mandatory Corporate Synergy and Team Building Excellence Retreat." Carter demanded that all senior staff and operational directors report to a luxury spa resort in northern Wisconsin for a mandatory 3-day weekend of trust falls, group meditation, and corporate harmony workshops. That exact weekend, I had 40 critical grain convoys moving temperature-sensitive crops for drought-affected farming co-ops across 3 states. Furthermore, my 19-year-old son, Dean, was counting on the stability of our company pension fund as he finished his trade school certification in industrial welding. I immediately drafted a concise reply. "Carter, I cannot attend the retreat. We have 40 critical agricultural loads moving this weekend. A 12-hour delay will cause millions of dollars in crop spoilage and ruin dozens of family farms. Have a productive weekend, Vance Miller, Director of Logistics." It was professional, clear, and grounded in operational reality. I was deeply mistaken to assume that logic or duty mattered to Carter Hayes. On Monday morning, the atmosphere inside the corporate dispatch building felt dangerously heavy. You know that precise barometric shift right before a severe tornado touches down? The usual citizen band radio chatter was unnervingly silent. Veteran dispatchers avoided eye contact as I walked past their cubicles. I sat down at my worn wooden desk, booted up my main terminal, and took a sip of black coffee. I entered my administrator security credentials. The screen flashed red, access denied, invalid authorization code. I assumed it was a system glitch, muttered under my breath, and re-entered the master password. Access denied, user account terminated. I was reaching for the desk telephone to call technical support when expensive Italian leather shoes began clicking sharply across the polished concrete floor. Carter Hayes emerged from the corridor, flanked by Chloe Bennett holding an electronic tablet and 2 towering private security officers. "System trouble, Anvil?" Carter asked, adjusting his silk necktie with a condescending smirk. I rotated my chair slowly to face him. "What is going on, Carter?" "We are executing a structural realignment for maximum cultural alignment," Carter declared, resting his hands on his hips. "Your blatant refusal to attend our mandatory executive retreat was the ultimate proof of your unwillingness to embrace modern company culture. You are stuck in the past, Vance." I stared at him, the heavy silence stretching tight as a ratcheting load strap over a steel beam. "You are firing your director of logistics during peak harvest season because I chose to safeguard 40 grain shipments instead of doing trust falls in Wisconsin. It is about organizational synergy," Chloe chimed in, her voice dripping with artificial corporate enthusiasm. "We require leaders who vibrate on our frequency. Your energy is inherently toxic to our forward-thinking paradigm." I looked at Chloe, then at Carter, and finally at the security guards. "Carter," I said, my voice dropping to a low, measured tone, "I am the sole authorized signatory for 80% of our vendor credit lines. I hold active security clearances for the Great Lakes Port Authority, Teamsters Local 705, and the Federal Agricultural Transport Alliance. Those legal authorizations do not simply transfer to your cloud server." Carter let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed across the quiet dispatch floor. "Everyone is replaceable, Anvil. That is basic business economics 101. Now hand over your master security badge." I looked down at my desk, the crackling citizen band radio, the framed photograph of my son Dean in his welding mask, the tarnished coffee mug given to me by my old military unit in Kandahar. I stood up smoothly and deliberately. I did not raise my voice. I did not slam my fists. I did not smash equipment. I reached into my pocket, unclipped my heavy master keycard, and tossed it onto Carter's manicured glass desk. "Understood, Chief," I said softly. "You have exactly 30 minutes before every heavy freight truck in your fleet stops rolling. Tell your old man I said good luck. My father is enjoying his retirement in Scottsdale," Carter sneered, kicking a chair leg. "He does not care about middle management help." "He will," I replied, grabbing my canvas jacket and Dean's photograph. By 2 o'clock this afternoon, your first major convoy hits the weigh scales in Toledo without certified electronic manifests. By 2:30, your entire nationwide network will realize that the heart of this company just got ripped out of the chassis. I turned on my heel and walked out. The heavy elevator doors slid closed on Carter's smug, unbothered face. I checked my wristwatch, 9:35 in the morning. Operation Hardstop was officially underway. The morning air in the parking lot smelled of diesel exhaust, cold rain, and pure freedom. I walked over to my heavy-duty Ford F-250, tossed my gear into the passenger seat, and climbed inside. Most corporate employees who get terminated after 22 years of dedicated service experience immediate panic. They worry about mortgage payments and healthcare coverage. A small part of my brain was naturally running those calculations. I am a single father. Dean's trade school tuition was due next month, and I needed to ensure that our driver pension pool remained completely untouched by executive greed. However, another part of me, the tactical command officer who had navigated ambushes in war zones, instantly kicked into high gear. Except this time, I was not mitigating a crisis. I was the incoming storm. I pulled out my personal cellular phone. Throughout my entire career, I had strictly maintained separate, personal, and business communications. My private contact directory contained the direct cell phone numbers of every major transport director, port authority, commissioner, and union shop steward in the Midwest. I did not broadcast a dramatic social media post or send a chaotic mass email. That is amateur behavior. I executed surgical legal precision. I opened a pre-drafted legal notification template that my private attorney had helped me construct years ago. It cited Clause 7B of our standard vendor service contracts, a critical protection clause I had personally written into every major transport agreement when Hayes Freight expanded nationwide. Clause 7B explicitly stipulated that if the designated key operational officer, myself, was separated from the firm, all credit extensions, loading bay authorizations, and customs clearances were automatically suspended pending a mandatory 30-day risk audit by the vendor. Furthermore, under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, specifically Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101, and established Delaware corporate precedent regarding breach of fiduciary duty, arbitrary executive actions that jeopardize major operational compliance create immediate legal liabilities for corporate officers. I attached my formal separation notice and dispatched the message to our major partners. First transmit, Apex Agricultural Transport. Sent, second transmit, Heartland Grain Consortium. Sent, third transmit, Great Lakes Port Authority Freight Division. Sent. Each sent message was like pulling a tactical safety pin from an operational grenade. Every single delay would cost Hayes Freight roughly $100,000 per hour in compounding contractual penalties. My personal phone rang instantly. The caller identifier showed Boyd Callahan, the lead shop steward for Teamsters Local 705. Boyd possessed a voice like crushed gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. Anvil, what in the hell is this automated legal notice I just received? Boyd demanded. Our main office just got a system bounce back stating your corporate email address is completely terminated. It is accurate, Boyd, I said calmly, leaning back against the leather seat of my truck. Carter Hayes escorted me out of the building 15 minutes ago. Cited cultural misalignment. Cultural misalignment? Boyd exploded into a loud, booming laugh. Does that pampered country club boy realize I have 200 union drivers pulling grain trailers right now? Cargo that will rot in the afternoon heat if we sit idle. My drivers cannot legally turn a wheel without your signed safety inspection clearances. That is Carter's operational emergency now, Boyd, I said smoothly. Perhaps Chloe Bennett can perform a meditation exercise to clear your rigs for transit. Not on my watch, Boyd barked. If you are not signing those safety manifests, my men park their trucks immediately. Clause 7B is fully active. Am I clear? Clause 7B is fully active, I confirmed. Copy that, brother. All union rigs are pulling over at the next exit. Enjoy your afternoon off, Anvil. That was the first massive domino falling. I started the engine of my F-250 and drove 3 miles down the interstate to my designated tactical post, Mabel's Diner near Route 88. It was a rugged truck stop with cracked vinyl booths, dark roasted coffee, and warm breakfast plates. I walked inside Mabel, the veteran waitress who had served me during dozens of late-night dispatch emergencies over the past 2 decades, brought over a fresh pot of coffee. "Morning, Vance," Mabel said softly. "You look like a man who just laid down a heavy burden." "Just setting up a temporary office, Mabel," I replied with a warm smile. "Keep the coffee coming." I opened my personal laptop, connected to the secure network, and loaded my private tracking dashboard. On the digital map, bright red status icons began popping up across 14 Midwestern states. A red icon indicated a commercial freight vehicle that had been stationary for more than 30 minutes during active transit hours. A dense cluster of red dots was rapidly forming outside the Great Lakes Port Terminal in Chicago. The security barrier gate codes for those massive shipping docks updated automatically every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. Historically, I personally verified the encrypted security keys and pushed them to our fleet mobile units. Today was Tuesday. The system required manual administrator verification to release the gates. I had not executed the verification before Carter escorted me out. Carter undoubtedly believed those massive iron port gates opened by magical corporate power or the sheer prestige of his business degree. At 11:15, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message from a dispatch manager at Central Illinois Ag Transport. "Mr. Miller, our drivers are locked outside the Chicago container terminal. Hayes Freight Dispatch is completely unreachable. Are we in breach of contract?" I replied immediately. "I am no longer employed by Hayes Freight. Pursuant to Clause 7B, I am legally unauthorized to issue security clearances or override dock locks. Contact CEO Carter Hayes directly." 3 minutes later, 40 additional red markers bloomed across the digital map. The Chicago shipping hub was officially frozen solid. At 12:30 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. It was the frantic, high-pitched voice of Chloe Bennett. "Vance," she practically shrieked into the phone. "You need to give us the master administrator passwords immediately. There are dozens of truck drivers shouting at our front gate security, and the Port Authority is threatening to impound our trailers." "Good afternoon, Chloe," I answered, keeping my tone measured and professional. "I am afraid I cannot assist your team." "What do you mean you cannot assist us?" she yelled. "We cannot log into the main server. It keeps demanding a multi-factor authentication code sent directly to your mobile phone." "Ah, yes," I said smoothly. "That is military-grade multi-factor security. It protects corporate assets against unauthorized access. Then read me the 6-digit code right now." "I cannot do that, Chloe," I replied. "I am a private civilian now. Disclosing administrator security credentials to unverified corporate personnel violates federal cybersecurity statutes under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1030. If I transmit those security tokens to an unverified user, I could face federal criminal prosecution." "Surely you would not ask me to commit a felony?" There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Carter says you are holding the entire company hostage," she stuttered. "Carter terminated my employment effective at 9:30 this morning," I reminded her. "That formal action immediately revoked my security clearance. I refuse to break federal law for an organization I am no longer part of." I heard the phone being violently snatched away, followed by Carter's voice, thick with uncontrolled rage and mounting panic. "Listen to me, Miller," Carter raged. "Stop playing these childish games right now. Give us the access tokens, or I will personally file a lawsuit against you for $50 million in corporate sabotage." "Carter," I said quietly, "you terminated me for cultural misalignment. You explicitly stated that everyone is replaceable. Surely your agile leadership team can execute a simple password reset through your primary technical service vendor." "We called technical support!" Carter slammed his fist against a surface. "They said only the registered key operational officer can authorize an account override. That takes 24 hours. 24 hours? I chuckled softly. "That sounds like a fundamental flaw in your corporate governance structure. I suggest paying their emergency consultation fee of $5,000 per hour to expedite the review. We have 300 tons of prime soybeans sitting in unrefrigerated trailers in Iowa." Carter screamed. If those trailers sit in the sun for another 3 hours, the heat will ruin the entire shipment. Soybeans are a delicate agricultural commodity, I observed calmly. Did you remember to renew the climate control power grid contracts for the regional storage depots? Those contracts expire on the last Tuesday of every month. I used to renew them manually because your automated billing system frequently glitches. A heavy sound echoed through the receiver, as if Carter had dropped his tablet onto the floor. "Fix this right now, Vance," Carter pleaded, his voice shifting from rage to desperate negotiation. "Come back to the office, sign the security overrides, and we can discuss a revised contract." "Are you offering to reinstate my employment?" I asked. "I am offering you a chance to avoid complete financial ruin." "No thank you, Carter," I replied easily. "I am currently occupied at Mabel's Diner, enjoying a hot lunch and catching up on personal matters. Have a wonderful afternoon." I ended the call, set the phone on the table, and took a deep breath. My hands were remarkably steady. I had just walked away from a panic-stricken chief executive, and the feeling was utterly liberating. I glanced back at my laptop screen. Red status markers were multiplying. A fresh cluster of red alerts appeared near the Miami cold storage facilities. The emergency power generation accounts had failed to process because the automated credit card verifications bounced without my personal authorization code. I immediately placed a call to Travis Cobb, the senior foreman at the Miami refrigerated terminal. "Travis, it is Vance Miller, Anvil. Man, we are hearing crazy rumors down here. Did that rich kid really cut you loose?" "He did, Travis," I confirmed. "Their fuel credit lines are going to bounce within the hour. Do not let your dock drivers sit there idling their engines. Hook those refrigerated trailers directly to your emergency shore power grid using contingency account 7751B. I established that fallback account 2 years ago." "Copy that, Anvil," Travis replied heartily. "We will protect the physical cargo, but not a single truck leaves this yard until you personally give the order. We stand with you, brother." That was the moment I fully realized a critical truth. I was not an unemployed victim. I was an independent operator possessing immense leverage. My true net worth was built upon 22 years of unquestioned integrity, legal foresight, and deep operational relationships across the American heartland. It was time to take the offensive. I began evaluating which logistics organization could best absorb our massive freight volume, while guaranteeing full protection for our workers. The obvious choice was Vanguard Freight Corporation. Their regional vice president, Harlan Prescott, was a formidable logistics strategist who had tried to recruit me for 6 consecutive years. I had always declined his offers out of deep personal loyalty to old Raymond Hayes. But loyalty is a two-way street, and Carter Hayes had just demolished that bridge with his unbridled arrogance. I dialed Harlan Prescott's private direct line. He answered on the second ring. "Vance Miller," Harlan said, his deep voice radiating surprise. "To what do I owe the distinct honor of this phone call?" "I am officially an independent agent, Harlan," I stated directly. A heavy, deliberate pause hung on the line. "Independent? Did Raymond's boy actually do something that stupid?" "At 9:30 this morning," I replied. "I am currently sitting at Mabel's Diner on Route 88. "Stay right where you are," Harlan said instantly. "I am dispatching an executive car to bring you to headquarters." "One condition, Harlan," I added. "I am bringing the operational routing for the Great Lakes Port Authority, the backing of Teamsters Local 705, and the entire network of the Heartland Grain Consortium." "Vance," Harlan chuckled richly. "I will send a stretch limousine." 20 minutes later, a sleek black Lincoln Town car pulled up to the gravel parking lot of Mabel's Diner. I climbed inside with my laptop bag and Dean's photo. As we traveled smoothly toward downtown Chicago, I checked nationwide transportation news portals. Specialized industry trade sites were blowing up with emergency alerts. The headline on Freight Insider read, "Hayes Systems experiences total fleet gridlock. Grain shipments stalled across Midwest." Then, a high-priority emergency news alert flashed across my screen. "Breaking news. Department of Transportation Safety Alert. Hayes Freight commercial vehicle involved in severe multi-rig accident on Interstate 80. Chemical hazardous material spill reported. Highway closed in both directions." I immediately dialed Boyd Callahan's mobile number. Boyd, tell me you are tracking Interstate 80, I said urgently. I am looking at the emergency report right now, Anvil, Boyd gritted out. It was not one of our union drivers. Carter Hayes panicked when our guys parked their rigs. He used a mobile phone application to hire an uncertified, non-union contract driver an hour ago to haul a tanker trailer. My stomach plummeted. What was in that tanker trailer? Industrial solvent, Boyd spat. The kid did not possess a valid hazardous materials endorsement on his commercial driver license. He took a sharp curve at high speed, jackknifed the rig, and ruptured the main tank. Chemical solvent is leaking across 3 lanes of the interstate. The Environmental Protection Agency is on scene. This was a catastrophic failure of executive governance. Under the Hazardous Materials Transportation Act, specifically Title 49 of the United States Code, Section 5101, operating a commercial vehicle carrying hazardous materials without certified driver endorsements carries severe federal criminal penalties and mandatory fleet-wide operational groundings. Is the young driver going to make it? I asked quietly. He is alive, Boyd reported. Banged up in the trauma center. But Hayes Freight is finished, Vance. The Department of Transportation is issuing an emergency order suspending their operating authority. The executive car arrived at Vanguard Freight Corporation's headquarters, a magnificent 40-story glass tower overlooking the Chicago River. Harlan Prescott was waiting in the marble lobby. Vance, Harlan said, shaking my hand firmly, you look remarkably calm for a man who just triggered a national logistics earthquake. I am focused on fixing the damage, Harlan, I replied. Carter's negligence just caused a major hazardous material spill on Interstate 80. Harlan's eyes narrowed. Then Hayes Freight stock is heading to absolute zero. Carter needs a miracle. Let us get to my office. We took the private express elevator to the 35th floor. Harlan poured 2 large mugs of black coffee. Our dispatch center has been overwhelmed with emergency calls. Major agricultural clients, ADM, Cargill, Tyson Foods, are desperately seeking emergency transport capacity. I can migrate our entire vendor network to Vanguard within 3 hours, I stated clearly. However, I require specific terms. Name them, Harlan said, leaning forward. I want full command of an autonomous division. Vanguard Strategic Agricultural Operations. I bring my veteran team, my driver relationships, and my operational framework. We report directly to you, period. You are asking for your own operational kingdom, Vance. Harlan observed with a subtle smile. I am offering you an unbeatable supply chain empire, I countered smoothly. And most importantly, we will absorb and protect the $20 million pension fund for all 400 Hayes Freight drivers under federal ERISA guidelines. Harlan brought his hand down firmly on the desk. Deal. Legal is drafting the agreement right now. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from my son, Dean. Dad, my welding instructor just showed us the news reports about Hayes Freight. Are you all right? I typed back immediately. Everything is under control, son. Strategic redeployment in progress. Focus on your welding certification. See you for dinner. As contracts were finalized, my phone rang with a call from Marshall Reed, senior legal counsel for Hayes Freight Systems. Vance, Marshall said, his voice trembling. Old Raymond Hayes just landed his private jet. He saw the stock price crash and the hazmat reports. He is furious. Thank you for the notification, Marshall, I said calmly. Tell him I am on my way to meet him. I grabbed my jacket. Harlan, finalize those signature documents. I have one final duty to perform. I drove my Ford F-250 to the private aviation terminal, where Raymond Hayes' Gulfstream jet had just taxied into the main hangar. The mobile air stairs lowered, and 72-year-old Raymond Hayes descended like a thunderstorm in a tailored suit. He was shouting into his mobile phone, his face crimson with rage. He looked around frantically for his private chauffeur, saw no one, and then spotted my heavy pickup truck, parked near the tarmac gate. He marched over furiously, yanked open the passenger door, and shouted, Vance, what in the hell have you done to my company? Get inside the truck, Raymond, I said, using his first name for the first time in 22 years. Raymond froze, caught completely off guard by my quiet authority. He looked around the deserted tarmac, realized his executive staff had abandoned him, and climbed stiffly into the passenger seat. Drive, Raymond growled, pulling his seatbelt across his chest. And you had better explain why 22 years of my life's work is currently crumbling on national television. I pulled out onto the main highway. It is a straightforward story, Raymond. It began with mandatory corporate synergy retreats and concluded with your son's complete operational incompetence. You destroyed my legacy, Raymond yelled, slamming his hand against the dashboard. No, Raymond, I corrected him firmly. I built your legacy. Your son destroyed it in 5 short hours. I simply stopped holding the structural pieces together. We drove in heavy silence for several miles until we neared the highway detour. Marshal Reed informed me about the hazardous materials spill on Interstate 80, Raymond said, his voice dropping an octave. How severe is the situation? It is fatal for Hayes Freight, I answered truthfully. Your son hired an uncertified contractor through a smartphone app because our union drivers refused to operate without safety clearances. The driver jackknifed a chemical tanker. The Environmental Protection Agency fines alone will drain your cash reserves, and that is before federal criminal charges under the Hazardous Materials Transportation Act and massive civil lawsuits hit your board of directors. Raymond stared out the window, his aged hands trembling slightly. Can I fix this? If I personally fire Carter right now, clean out executive management, and offer you a full partnership, will you return? Negative, Raymond, I said gently. Too much structural damage has been done. Furthermore, the Great Lakes Port Authority transferred all shipping rights to Vanguard Logistics 2 hours ago. Your entire vendor network has already migrated. Raymond slumped back into the leather seat, letting out a dry, bitter laugh. Clause 7B, he muttered softly. I remember when you insisted on inserting that clause into our vendor agreements 15 years ago. I told you it was excessive caution. It was operational insurance, Raymond, I said. Your son just triggered the policy payout. We arrived outside Hayes Freight corporate headquarters. The entrance was surrounded by police cruisers, television news vans, and federal environmental investigation vehicles. Drop me at the rear loading dock, Raymond requested quietly. I maneuvered the truck around to the concrete loading bays, where Raymond and I had first shaken hands 22 years ago. He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the truck door, and then paused, looking back at me. Vance, is there any way to save the driver pensions? 400 families are depending on that fund. I have already handled it, Raymond, I replied. Under our agreement with Vanguard Logistics, Vanguard will acquire all remaining physical assets of Hayes Freight for exactly $1, assuming all operational liabilities and fully guaranteeing the $20 million driver pension pool under federal ERISA regulations. Every single driver retains their retirement and health benefits. Raymond stared at me, tears welling in his weathered eyes. Sell my entire life's work for $1 single? Raymond, I said softly, right now. Your company carries negative net value due to pending federal liabilities. I am offering you a dignified exit and an absolute guarantee that your workers will not suffer for your son's arrogance. A heavy sigh escaped Raymond's chest as 72 years of pride yielded to reality. Do it, he whispered. Save the driver pensions. I will sign whatever documents Vanguard requires. He stepped down from the truck and walked slowly toward the building, a defeated founder returning to supervise the final shutdown of his empire. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office on the 35th floor of Vanguard Freight Corporation. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I watched massive container ships being loaded at the Great Lakes Port Terminal. Many trailers still carried faded Hayes Freight stencils, but they were now moving seamlessly under Vanguard operational manifests. The pension fund transfer had executed flawlessly. All 400 veteran drivers retained their full benefits and seniority. On the wall behind my desk hung a polished brass plaque presented to me by Boyd Callahan and Teamsters Local 705. It read simply, "To Vance Anvil Miller we roll." When you say roll. Carter Hayes subsequently pleaded guilty to federal regulatory violations and corporate embezzlement, receiving an 18-month sentence in federal custody. Chloe Bennett's short-lived corporate wellness consulting agency collapsed within weeks after major corporate sponsors severed ties. Old Raymond Hayes settled permanently in Arizona, sending me a box of vintage wine with a brief note, "To the finest logistics officer I ever served alongside. My senior administrative coordinator walked into my office holding an electronic tablet. Morning operational briefing, Vance. Division fleet utilization is up 23%, customer satisfaction is at an all-time high, and we have logged 0 safety infractions for 6 consecutive months. Outstanding work, I replied. My phone rang. It was an urgent call from our Nebraska field office regarding an unexpected early frost threatening winter wheat convoys. I put on my headset, pulled up our real-time routing map, and smiled. This is Vance Miller. Let us move some freight. That evening, I met my son Dean at a local steakhouse to celebrate his official graduation from trade school. He sat across from me, grease still visible under his fingernails, his eyes filled with genuine pride. "Dad," Dean said, raising his glass. "My instructor told our entire class that what you did at Hayes Freight is now taught as a masterclass in supply chain management and labor protection." "It was never about becoming a legend, Dean," I said warmly. "It was about a fundamental truth. Real-world competence will always triumph over arrogant privilege. The working men and women of this country are the ones who truly keep America moving. And whenever corporate suits forget that fact, it is our duty to remind them exactly how the world operates." The pension pool was permanently secured, our drivers were thriving, the freight moved without interruption, and justice had prevailed across the heartland.